Okay, welcome back. We are on episode 4 of the Wheel of Time Amazon television show. We open with a flashback to Logain in Gildan. He is attacking, assumedly the capital is still Gehenna, and he's easily beaten the king, it seems. He brushes past the two bodyguards that the king leaves behind to slow him down, and corners the king in this area. We get a nice shot of the taint manifesting itself in the form of these wisps that are whispering to him and trying to get him to kill the king that he has now defeated. We get to see Logain reveal the type of man that he is, and that even with the madness gripping him and trying to drive him to do this cruel, not even cruel, because they were just fighting seconds ago. This king drew a dagger and tried to stab Logain seconds before we get to this part right here, where Logain releases him from his flows of air and heals his wound. And the king, seeing this compassion, seeing the character and caliber of man that he is dealing with, says, you must be the dragon, and follows him. And so we have a dragon sworn king of Gildan. This is it's a deviation. I don't hate it. Gildan is definitely one of the least unified, least powerful of the nations. Top 3 weak nations would probably be Gildan, Mirundi, and Altara. But that could change too. This is an entirely new cycle, supposedly, so we can't make any assumptions on that. Maybe Gildan is super strong and this doesn't make any sense, but going on what we know from the books about Gildan, this makes sense. From here we go back to the present, right after we left off episode 3. Seems to be a theme where we jump back in the prologue and then we come to where we left off at the end of the episode after the credit or opening scroll. Moraine is getting healed by Karini. Karini, at this point in the books, is not alive anymore. She was one of the women that the Amerlin, who heard the prophecy of the dragon from her keeper, sends out to find the dragon and is murdered. And we find this out in New Spring. Moraine, being the accepted in the room at the time, is overlooked by the people hunting the hunters, and so is able to go on looking for the dragon for all these years. Her not being dead, no big deal. We're using characters that exist in name at least, so okay, that's fine. Moraine and her in the same scene is cool, kind of like a nod to that whole dual, their shared purpose. So from this, though, we go outside and we get a shot of Steppen, Karini's warder, sparring with Lan. They're just kind of exchanging some dialogue. Steppen mentions that Swan is frustrated with the two of them being gone so long, and that's a theme in the books too. Swan having to put on this, not even really put on, because she definitely is frustrated with not hearing enough from Moraine. But they're giving us a little taste of Aes Sedai politics, and I like that. Then Steppen makes a comment about Nynaeve's presence, which kind of implies that Lan has a habit of picking up women to travel along with the two of them. Maybe it's just a reference to Lan's... like when Lan was not a warder, he was a very desirable man. Like, women would constantly court after him, so maybe that's what it's referencing. And women, it's referenced in the books that Lan is constantly having women throwing themselves at him. But it's never really implied that he has any attachment to them as far as traveling with them and like spending time with them outside of they're trying to court him. Maybe that's different. Maybe that's just something that Robert Jordan just didn't really want to go into in his books. it's neither here nor there, really. If Lan is having women travel with him in Moraine, I don't necessarily know if it would really ruin their relationship, because to me they were never really in an intimate relationship in that nature. They were intimate in the way that siblings would be intimate. Like they loved each other, but not like in a romantic sense. So that doesn't affect anything as far as their characterization together, in my opinion. Stepin comes back in and speaks with Karini for a while, and they kind of mention that they're aware of what Leandrin is doing, where she's going around stilling men without a trial, and that obviously that tells us that that's still not legal, that's still not kosher. So it's nice to get that confirmation that that's still a law that I said I follow, and they want to have due process for the men that can channel, even though that due process is literally always you get gentled. But they give them a trial. We jump around a little bit between the boys. Perrin and Egwene are with the Tinkers. They kind of chit-chat about how they don't trust the Tinkers necessarily. It's kind of strange, because Perrin seems to be implying he wants to leave, and then Egwene says, okay, if either of us want to leave, we'll leave. And it's like, well, didn't he kind of just say that? But whatever. She's supposed to be a little bossy and kind of ride over him whenever he's not adamant about something. We cut back. Oh, Aram actually has a nice little part here where he was actually being welcoming to both of them, and I appreciate that. Aram in the books was a jerk. It was appropriate because they were all supposed to be teenagers, and I think moving them up to be like 20-somethings, it was nice in that we can get a more nuanced look at certain people, because certain people were definitely portrayed as just idiot kids or jealous kids, or they were kids for sure, but they were still in the books. They had a complexity to them, but it wasn't immediately apparent because they wanted to develop it over the course of 14 books and give us things to have change and feel different from before. Maybe Aram will still go through a similar characterization in this. I look forward to it. I hope his fate is different. If they're going to change one thing, Aram's fate is what I would ask them to change. We cut over to Matt, Tom, and Rand. It is a bit strange, if I'm honest. They're looking at the woods and stuff. They're trying to get through and find somewhere to like stay for the night, and they're talking about Tom being like trying to earn their trust by killing Dana, but to me, like, that's just questionable, because like, what's even the point of that? Like, she had you at sword point. They had you. If he was a dark friend too, he didn't need to gain your trust because you were already at their mercy. But okay, I guess whatever. Maybe it's just if it was Matt asking that, that's one thing, because he's being corrupted by the dagger and is mistrustful. But Rand being the one to raise that question is very strange. Matt mentions the fact that Dana referenced 5 of them, and they thought Nynaeve was dead, and there's only 4 of the people from the 2 rivers leaving. Kind of implying, maybe Nynaeve is the dragon, guys. So they're really drilling into this mystery aspect of it. From the 3 of them, Tom's not very much in that scene. He's kind of just walking ahead of them. But from that group, we go back to Moraine and Alana in the cave. Moraine and Karini. They're going to relieve Leandrin of her duty, with Alana shielding the false dragon Logain. We get a neat shot of the shield being applied. I don't really know how I feel about the mechanics of this scene. Just implying that the source is accessible from all directions of your body. I mean, it's really not how it was described in the books, but at the same time, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because I don't really think you could visually interpret what the books were saying this would look like or feel like. So this is fine. I like the whole web going over him. I don't necessarily like the fact that there's 2 shields on him instead of it just being there's a circle of people, holding a bigger shield. That seems to me like how they would do that, even if it is a different turning, even if the rules are a little different. Why would that not be the way you're doing this? And why only 2? Assuming this, like everything they're telling us, like Karini is exhausted from her having to hold the shield. The spoilers for this review, but Logain breaks free at the end of it. So it obviously 2 people weren't enough. I don't know why this is the protocol of only using 2 people to hold the dragon or false dragon. They have a bunch of other women with them. They could have had 4. They could have had 6. But they didn't. And it seems as if this is the rule where they only use 2. I have to assume that they have problems a lot. Originally, men would be significantly stronger than women. So 1-to-1, you would just immediately break free. Even 2-to-1, like you would usually see the man break free. But once you get to 3, 4, 5, 6 women, like there's nothing really he can do, regardless of what the women's strength is. Assuming they change that, because everything else they're changing, I would assume they're going to change that, and it's a 1-to-1 strength ratio where it's like women have a scale and men have a scale, and it's essentially the exact same scale. I still don't see the argument for not having 3 or 4 people doing this, because what if one of them is a dark friend? Why not have a bunch of them? And if you can have multiple shields, like all the more reason, right? Like you can just put 4 shields on there, and you're not having to hold him with half of his strength. You're all just holding for a quarter. And I don't know about you guys, but if I had to hold half as much of a thing, I probably could hold it for a lot longer than twice as long. But that's that. I feel like this is just a mistake where they didn't want to like crowd up the scenes, crowd up the shot. They wanted to show off the set. Maybe it's just literally because they wanted to allow for him to escape later. But if that's the case, like that's bad storytelling in my opinion. Like if your plot requires 3,000 years of shitty policy, not like bad in like a moral sense, but just this is literally not effective. This would not function for 3,000 years. Someone would have noticed, hey, we keep having people break free and kill us. Maybe we should have more of us keeping them from being able to do that. But that's not how that works here, apparently. So Moraine volunteers to take Karini's turn holding the shield, even though she was unconscious for several days now. Okay, though. Whatever. It is what it is. And that gives her and Alana time to have a discussion. It gets a bit... Alana's pumping Moraine for information, essentially, but very subtly and just trying to like build up to it. But Moraine knows she's doing that and calls her on it. They exchange a little bit of dialogue, and if you know the context of what Alana does later on in the story, one warder would never do. And then Moraine smiles at her, like, a little promiscuous comment. Like, oh, I need all the warders for my appetites. So, if you know what she does later on in the story, that to me that sounds a lot more sinister and creepy to me. Like, maybe I'm letting my foreknowledge color my judgment of her now, but I definitely don't think her warders were enthused about going to that tent later on in the scene. We'll get to that. You'll see her face that. Leandrin, having been relieved, goes outside and sees Nynaeve sitting alone. Obviously, she approaches her and immediately starts talking shit about Moraine. Uh, you know, I've said it before. I'll say it again. They are characterizing Leandrin appropriately. She was terrible in the books. She's terrible here. Uh, Terrible people. Great characterization. Uh, from there, we go back to the boys and Tom, and they find the barn that they're looking for. No, not the barn they're looking for. They find a barn because they're looking for shelter. And they're trying to rest there for the night and then leave again in the morning. Tom says, we're not going to ask permission. We're just going to go sleep in it. The boy's like, okay, well, I don't think that's a good idea, but okay. They get ambushed by the farmer. It's starting to get tense, and then Rand diffuses the situation by pointing out that he is holding the bow with a fist grip instead of just with a couple fingers up at the back of the arrow itself, at the fletching. And he makes, I was never good with this, and it's kind of like a deprecating scene. And then his wife and young son, are standing directly behind the group, holding their bows properly and pointing them at the three men who are trying to sleep in the barn. Everybody stands down just because Rand was honest. Maybe it's a bit of Taviran at work because they might not be this trusting usually, but whatever. I don't think this necessarily was Taviran. Maybe this was just a bit of compassion from a farmer to a traveling group of people. It kind of mirrors a lot of the scenes in the in the first book, where we're going from Whitebridge up to Camelin with Matt and Rand. And this happens quite often along that journey, where they will rest for the night and in exchange do some work. Maybe they'll sing and juggle. Maybe they'll muck out the stables. Maybe they'll help cut some wood. But it's nice to see them keeping that aspect of that journey. From there, we go back to Perrin and Egwene with the Tinkers traveling along. We get a bit of an info dump on the Way of the Leaf. The Way of the Leaf is essentially pacifism. It's going with the flow of the pattern, offering no violence, fleeing if someone tries to attack you. Basically, the only defense the Tinkers have are big, scary dogs that will try and ward people off, but they don't. The dogs don't even attack people. In the books, we get the same dump. We have these same people, but there's Elias with Perrin, and Perrin didn't kill his wife, so he doesn't have this necessary. He doesn't necessarily have this aversion to violence that he has right here. Obviously, he doesn't relish in it. He's not a violent man per se, but he understands when violence might be necessary if someone was trying to enforce their will on you. If he said, if I was being bullied, I wouldn't let somebody bully me. I would hit them back. And good for him. You should do that. I am not a follower of the Way of the Leaf. Oh, I take that back. I am a subscriber to the Way of the Leaf. Everybody go check them out. But I am not a follower of the Way of the Leaf. So we don't get that pushback that we get in the books here, where we're told the pacifist side, but we're also told this is the downfalls of that philosophy from Perrin himself. He pushes back against that. And he doesn't do that here, obviously, because he just killed his wife. I can't blame the man. I wouldn't either. I'd be like, oh God, I should never touch a blade again. We're cutting back and forth a bit, and we go to Matt and Tom and Rand. Matt and Rand are working. Tom's kind of waiting there because he was performing for the family. That's how he earned his keep. After they finish up a bit, Matt goes for a walk and runs into the little girl who, she wasn't in the first shot with the family, but assumedly she was at the farmhouse or something. He is offered a little doll named Birgitta, which I found nice as a little lore blurb there. We actually got some little blurbs from Dana last episode about the Stone of Tyr and Ogier settings. We'll see if we actually get to see those in the show. Assumedly, we'll see the Son of Tyr eventually. Assumedly, we'll see them eventually. It's just a matter of how soon we'll get to see them. I'm actually looking forward to that. I hope they. So far, I've enjoyed their like architectural and landscape shots. So I've got to assume that the Son of Tyr is going to be a very cool looking building. I'm looking forward to the tower as well. Hopefully, that's awesome. So we see Matt talking to the little girl. He gets offered the doll. He's like, no, you keep your doll. And he's really good with her because he has two little sisters of his own that he's essentially raising because his parents are deadbeats. Never forget, the Two Rivers is a hellhole now. Tom and Rand are talking in the barn, and Tom thinks that Matt is a channeler because of the way he's acting due to the dagger's influences. In the books, y'all should make a meme of that. I just keep saying in the books, but in the books, Tom thinks it's Rand, just like everybody else who is aware of anything in the books, and having him now think that it's Matt, whatever. It's reasonable to think it's Matt based on what he knows so far in this. So I appreciate Tom being astute and being observant. Obviously, he's not correct, but I mean, a man would not assume that you're walking around with a guy carrying a piece of an object that carries the taint of Mashadar. Like, you don't want to. Like, I don't know if that's literally ever happened besides Matt. So I don't fault him for being wrong. His conclusion is logical. It's just incorrect. Cut back to the Nynaeve arc, where she is having, some fun with Lan and the other warders around the fire. And yeah, so Alana walks up, and all the warders are talking about their duty to their Aes Sedai, right? And so Alana walks up, and y'all can see, look at this face. She's licking her lips. She's literally licking her lips, looking at her two warders like they're pieces of meat. And they had just made comments about how they're exhausted directly before this. And she didn't hear that. She didn't know that. But if they are exhausted, she would be aware they're exhausted. And maybe it's just what I know she does later that makes me feel like she's doing nefarious things now. Maybe it's not even necessarily it is nefarious, but she would not view it as such. She would view it as, this is just how it's done. But it definitely feels like there was something icky going on with the three of them. I did not. I felt concerned for those two men. Yeah. But that happens to men in the books too, I guess. From here, we go to a shot with Lan and Moraine. Lan apologizes for what happened with Shadowell Logoth. Moraine says, no, your mistakes are my mistakes. And while she does say, we're in this together, but I can't help but, maybe chuckle would be the best term at the way she phrased that. Your mistakes are my mistakes. Your mistakes are my mistakes, but let's not make any mistake about this. This was your mistake. So just kind of mentioning it once again that it was Lan's fault that they had to go to Shadowell Logoth and not just the way things were forced to be. But okay, it's always a man's fault. We get actually a really nice scene in the Tinker camp where Egwene is dancing with Aram, and he's describing basically what the Tinker way of life is all about. Is they're looking for the song, and they believe the song will bring back peace and prosperity, and everybody will live in harmony again. And Egwene makes it's a little cheesy of a line about maybe you already found it, referring to the song that they're playing right then because people are dancing together and they are living a peaceful, prosperous life. Maybe not prosperous by some definitions, but it seems good enough, And obviously they don't have a permanent settlement, but with the amount of open land I've seen, they probably could if they wanted to. But they're looking for the song, so they travel. Then from that fire. Like you see Perrin for a second in the background. He walks off because he doesn't want to be part of the festivities, and he goes to work and he starts helping repair wagon wheels and things like that. After he helps somebody, Ela says, "Hey, come talk to me for a bit," and she she gives a bit of information about how rebirth and all that works, and how she follows the way of the leaf, not to make peace for her children or her children's children, but to make peace for a point in the weaving of the pattern, so that when her daughter is reborn again, she might live in peace. And I don't think that the way of the leaf is necessarily how you achieve peace, because it requires everyone to adopt it just kind of spontaneously. But if everyone followed the way of the leaf, that would probably be a pretty decent place. It just, you can't. Everyone's not going to follow it, so you need people who are willing to stand up to those people. That's just the way the world is, and it's also the way this world is. And you get to see. I really, really, really like. I'm gonna spoil a scene towards the end of the last book. Towards it's like almost like one of the last parts of the last book, and it's Isla and Rain, where they are helping the wounded at the last battle, and Rain makes a comment about how if they survive this fight, it will be because of the people that fought. And Isla's like, "No, Rain, don't fall, don't abandon the way of the leaf." And he's like, "No. The way is still my way. It is still what is right for me. But maybe I'll just not judge the people who can't follow it so harshly, because if not for them, the world would have fallen to the shadow." Like I really, like, that to me is that is the fate of the way. It is to exist as an idealized version of what the world could be, if not constantly beset by evil. And the Age of Legends kind of had this. It wasn't necessarily perfect, right? People were still people, but it was significantly more of a, like, there was not war. Like, there was no large scale conflicts, and so assumedly the way makes strides. It can succeed. So hopefully Isla's daughter gets to be born into a time of peace, because she deserves to not have to be murdered and stuff. We get a little bit of info from Aram about the nature of the Tinkers, and that they kind of have like a Rumspringa period where they will leave the traveling people and like see if they want to travel. It makes sense from like a egalitarian standpoint, in that they would do this, but it seems to me that in a time period where you don't have communication systems, where you don't have ease of travel, leaving someone behind in that manner, because it didn't sound like there was like a set period when they were going to come swing back and pick them up. It was supposed to be they come back to the traveling people, and maybe there's like a regimented, like, okay, we go here and then we go here and then we go here and then we go here, and it's just like a route that they take, and they just constantly follow this route, and it's just like a planned thing that they could just find their traveling group again, or maybe there's like meeting locations where all the traveling people go to. I know that those exist. I don't necessarily know how often everybody goes to one, so much as I think people just kind of go to the nearest one at the points when they're supposed to gather. So maybe that's how they would get back. Maybe the Tinkers would be able to rejoin their band at one of these gathering places. That'd be kind of neat. But it feels like they've added this change, not considering the actual lifestyle that they're making the change to. So I have questions. They didn't answer that question. I would like to hear how these people who go away for Rumspringa come back. After we get this nice scene with the Tinkers, we go back to Matt, Rand, and Tom. Tom is not in this shot right away, but we have Rand comforting Matt in his dream. Matt's not sleeping quietly, and Rand says, "Hey man, I'm here for you. Let me know. I got your back." And so they both go to sleep. Rand has a dream sequence. In the books, I would assume this is the one where he sees parents smashing figurines of people that they know, and then in this one he's assumedly smashing his wife. He's chopping into her, and Rand is like saying, "Hey, don't do that, stop that." And Matt's walking around very creepily, very eerily, very ominously. Then we get Matt going into the barn. Like Rand wakes up, he sees Matt's gone. He goes outside to look for him, follows him over to the farmhouse or whatever, and there's bodies everywhere. The family's been killed, and Matt is standing there very creepily holding the ruby-hilted dagger, and we get a shot, but Rand can't see this, where there's black, like, mist, almost like the taint, but it's Mashadar, all over his face. And he says, "I see you," points the dagger up at the loft, and a Fade steps forward. So it's like, oh, phew, Matt did not kill this family. Thank God. That would have been terrible, because in the books, Matt gets very suspicious of people. He even threatens them. He grabs his dagger and he's like thinking about killing them. And Rand's like, no, what are you doing? So it's definitely something that would be possible for a dagger tainted Matt to be driven to. But I'm very, very happy that that was not the case. Then we go back to the Aes Sedai. This is arguably just a very long scene, and it finishes out the episode. You could probably cut it up into several scenes if you wanted to, but I would say from this point on, we're dealing with Logain's escape and the attack from the Dragonsworn. We see Liandrin trying to convince Karine to let Logain, quote unquote, break free, so that they would have an excuse to still him. That's against the law. Arguably, that would be using the power as a weapon. Even if it's not that, this is something that is so heinously illegal that they would not. Just talking about it would be something that could get you very much punished. Because you can't lie. She's suggesting it. It's like, oh yeah, okay, well, I'm just saying it's a hypothetical. It's like, okay, yeah, well, okay, Liandrin, if that's what you're saying. So, I've heard theories where some people think that because of this scene, I think, that she is part of how Logain gets free. I don't think that that's really supported in the visual evidence of that other scene, but we can say that she does that. So let's say that she does do that, right? She drops her shield, and then Logain's able to break free of just Karine's. That would be stopped by having a third person there, wouldn't it? Or a fourth person. That make sure maybe we should have 4 people, right? That way, if one of them is a dark friend, one of them can deal with him, and then 2 of them can maintain the shield. Or and here's a crazy idea. You could just have 4 people so that you're not having to use so much effort to contain the dude. But I'm not in charge of this show. If I was, I would do things significantly differently than they are doing. We go outside and we see Lan doing a ceremony. I wish we'd gotten more about Malkier here, and less vagary, more of the actual story of the fall. But I don't think Lan would be speaking about that just yet. So I'm okay with not getting it. I just love it. So I'm ready for it. I'm ready to hear it on screen as well. It's pretty quick after this that we get there's Dragonsworn approaching. It cuts back to the cave. Karine's wards trickling off, and we hear outside the approach of the Dragonsworn army. the Aes Sedai and warders outside gather together, all except for Moraine, and begin to resist the attack. We have 3 green sisters, 3 red sisters, and what appears to be several warders. So it with 6 Aes Sedai, even without Nynaeve being able to channel, even assuming let's just remove the warders, like just 6 Aes Sedai should be able to take this army all alone. Like it's not difficult for Aes Sedai to avoid getting hit by arrows, because they can just whip up wind so that they're not effective to begin with, and then use shields closer in to actively prevent being hit. And the ability to shatter ground, to create like long range attacks at will with fire and air and everything, and then heal each other. They're pressed more than I would expect these Aes Sedai to end up getting pressed. We get a few cool shots, but a few shots are really corny, and if y'all watched the episode, let me know which ones y'all enjoyed, which ones y'all didn't. Some of the effects I thought actually were pretty good. Some of the effects I thought were they were described to me as it looked like a music video, and when I heard that description, I'm like, you know what? That's exactly what it is. So that's the thumbnail of this week's video. By the way, it's Alana posing with her warders with explosions in the background. Like this shot right here is just so, to me, like okay, like it's a bit over the top. Like, why is she doing this behind herself? Like what is going on right now? They're like, oh, I don't want to look at it. Just okay. Let's assume they're doing that because they don't want to get hit by debris, right? Or shrapnel, if you want to phrase it like that. She should just be raising a shield to protect them from the shrapnel. Like the shrapnel hitting the dude on our left in his right side of his neck would still kill him. Like what is like sure, oh, he's got a spear there. No. Like, this is shrapnel we're talking about. Like, that could just pierce through his neck and he's dead. That just look at what you're doing. Make a shield. Don't pose for the camera. So before this spot, Logain escapes. Some people will say it's Liandrin. Some people will say whatever. To me, it just seems like, okay, well, Logain was just waiting for his army to show up, and he could have broken free literally whenever he wanted to. Moraine comes in and kind of stalls for time for Karine and Liandrin to wake back up. They end up getting, I wouldn't call it the upper hand, but they've got what might be described as a balance struck between the 3 of them and him, and he slips an attack out through their shield that's closing in on them. And in the books, it's kind of described as like a flow, right? Like, so if you are a channeler, you can access the source, and you draw that source into yourself, and then you weave it out into whatever you're trying to do. Like, maybe it's a fire weave, maybe it's fire, water, and air to like form something. So you're actively channeling it through you and then out. And so a shield cuts the point where it's coming into you, and then whatever you had is gone. Like you've lost your connection to the source. The way this seems to be working, and like that, and it's not necessarily something where it's just boom, it's all there, or it's not, right? It's a constriction. It's as the shield slips between you and the source, you're able to draw less and less and less. So if what's holding the shield back is your channeling, you're on a losing battle because you're getting less power as you're losing the fight. Like it's downhill all the way. Like once you start slipping, you're gonna keep going. So it makes sense that once they get there, they're able to finish it. It does not make sense that they're able to get there to begin with, because once someone is holding the source, you're not just slipping something in between nothing and nothing. You're interrupting something that's actively there, and there's resistance because you're touching something, even if that something is a metaphysical connection to reality itself. And it's not the most egregious change if it is even really a change, not just a different representation of that description. But the way Kareen responds to when he slips past their shield, I find a bit strange. She's able to cut either she slices through to two of the weaves and doesn't stop one coming for her, or she erects two shields in front of Moraine and Leandrin and not in front of herself. So we see her see this happening. We watch her realize he's launching an attack as they're getting near to, being safe again. And again, I don't know, like, if she's cutting the weaves, okay, she doesn't have time to cut the third one. If she's forming a shield, why didn't she just form the shield right then? But whatever. So she makes the choice. It's actively a choice to not block the one in front of her, and she gets killed. Let's assume she could not stop all three of them, and so that this was a heroic sacrifice on her part. And that's good. She's a green sisters would probably do this. Good stuff. Now, if the three of them were barely containing him, then one of them is gone. Even if Leandrin pulls in more power, I don't see how the two of them could then hold him. But let's say he's holding her. They've got the strength, they can do it. Okay, they've got it done. So they've got him in a tremulous state where okay, maybe we've got him, maybe we don't. Back to the Aes Sedai outside, they are getting overwhelmed a bit. The red sister here, she takes some arrows, and one of the greens heals her. This is when we get the music video action pose. Hey, yeah, like that. And then we go back in to see Leandrin struggling to pull in more and more of the power to try and contain Logain. As they begin to get it under control again, actually she's no longer having to burn herself through, and he is starting to actively be shielded and not a threat. Steppen shows up. Steppen sees Kareen on the floor. When an Aes Sedai dies in the books, the warder goes into a blood rage where he will try and kill whoever killed her, regardless of the cost to himself or anyone else. It is an imperative to him to do this. And so him charging Logain in this situation makes sense. He does not have full control of his faculties, even beyond just he saw someone that who he has a close connection with, emotionally die. This is a part of his soul was ripped away minutes ago by this man. And so he charges in, leaps, and strikes with his axes, piercing the shield and allowing the flows to go out of it and explode the axe heads and, essentially kill everybody in the room. And this I don't like. You want to say, okay, well, the whole body shield, that's cool. I like the whole body shield. The whole, he can slip things through the shield as it's closing. Okay, well, that's fine. That's fine. That could just be a representation of how it's described. The axe piercing the spirit shield is silly. Why wouldn't he just stab it? Why doesn't he just stab through the shield himself? He doesn't have a sword or something. Okay, well, does it have to be a certain amount of force? I don't like the idea that physical things interact with spirit flows, and it should not be interacting with the shield for sure. And if it isn't, okay, so let's say he's able to summon this, flow because of the piercing starting, and so he's able to. So we're not necessarily breaking that rule where he's channeling inside the shield, right? So he can't channel inside the shield and break the shield that way. He has to use his will to push against their will to try and get to the source to be able to then channel. But this is just silliness where that's no longer a thing. Like, you can just have someone else pierce the shield. Like, it's not the same amount of threat that it was before getting shielded. So having shattered the axes, everybody dies. Lan's laying there bleeding out. Moraine's bleeding out. Everyone's hit by these shrapnels and they're bleeding out. Nynaeve, miraculously, is not. I couldn't necessarily tell if she just wasn't in the room yet because she's in the back, or if she's just in the back and doesn't get hit, or if it's Ta'Veren and she doesn't get hit. But whatever the reason is, she's alive, she doesn't get hit, she's fine. And, well, I shouldn't say fine, because she's very upset because Lan's dying. And if anyone's aware of how Nynaeve functions in the books, when she's able to get angry, or once she gets angry, because let's be honest, she's usually angry, she is able to then channel. And her channeling, she is one of the strongest female channelers to ever live. Like, she is at the level of, like, Forsaken. She can hold her own against anybody, right? And her specific forte is healing. So if we're gonna give anybody a rule-breaking heal, I'm okay with it being her. Okay, AoE healing is not a thing in the books. You have to touch someone to heal them. Nynaeve is extremely good at healing, so if anybody's going to be able to do it without touching them, I'm okay with it being her. The whole shot here where her one large braid splits into a bunch of them, I could take it or leave it. I understand why people would find it aesthetically engaging. I find it a bit anime-ish, like she's going Super Saiyan, and I find that a bit strange. In Loghain's shock, he's like, "Oh wow, that was a lot of power. I did not expect anyone to be able to do that." And based on what Moraine had just told him about the nature of the dragon being so much more powerful than him that he looks like nothing, he's like, oh wow, maybe she's the dragon. And so, like, we've gotten several things this episode where we're really doubling down on there have been false dragons that are women apparently now. Like, women can be the dragon in this show, and I don't like that. I hope we all know that Rand is still going to be the dragon. Like, this is all just misdirection to drum up drama and to have engagement. But even suggesting that they don't know that men, like, the dragon is a man, it kind of misses the point. Like, the last dragon was a man. He corrupted Saidin through his arrogance. The arrogance. And so this time around, the dragon, he needs to be a man again to make up for that, to redeem that failure. And so even, like, suggesting it like this, thinking that is something that the pattern is going to do, it's not supported in the text. It's not something that I like from a narrative perspective. It's not something that I like, but maybe other people do. So to each their own. It's not something that's going to ruin the show for me. I just find it a bit boring. Like, we all know who he is. Like, we don't need to have this back and forth stuff. So having Loghain on the back foot with this display of power, Liandrin jumps up, tells the other Aes Sedai who have run into the cave, link with me. They do a little hand sign gesture, like freaking, like it's some sort of choreographed thing to join a circle, which okay, it's the visual medium that they're just trying to make it more engaging. I thought it was a bit silly, but the gravity of what Leandra is doing, I think, kind of, it makes me ignore how silly the actual motions that they're doing is, because she is stilling Logain, or gentling Logain for a man. Like, that's how they use 2 different words for the same exact thing for men and women, and they use burning out if you do it on accident. So, I might say stilling for men, I might say gentling. I don't think I'll ever say gentling for women, but, they're gentling Logain here on the spot, even though they're supposed to take him to Tarvalin. And, like, I understand, like, they just got attacked by his followers. And, I mean, he did demonstrate that he could break through 2 of their shields fairly easily, in my opinion. So, I don't think this is justified, because you could just use 4 people to shield him, but I understand where Leandrin is trying to use this, how Leandrin is justifying this to the other sisters to let her do this to him. I really like the visual here. This he's sitting there crying tears, I don't know, of joy, of regret. He is extremely conflicted emotionally at what he's seeing from Nynaeve. And he's lifted in the air, and, like, his power is broken. And we see this, very dramatic, like, almost like wings coming out of his chest. And you can see it a lot better in the video, but in this still, you can almost see it right here on his collar. There's a tear that has been torn from his face, and you can see the anguish in his face already. Like, this is possibly one of the most painful experiences a person could go through, and not necessarily just from, like, the immediate pain that you experience, but because of what comes next, right? The rest of, like, you are maimed, like, worse than maimed. You go from being a superhuman being to being a human. Like, you can't, and it's more than just that too, because there's an addiction to the power. And it's more than just the addiction to power itself. There is a sweetness to it. It enhances life. Like, things taste more. They smell more. Like, with the power in you, you can experience the world at a heightened state of being, and that is no longer available to him. And sure, when he's doing that, he's constantly immersed in the filth and the taint. But that doesn't matter to how alluring it is, how seductive it is. And that is why every man will eventually go mad, because he cannot resist the desire to touch the source, and in touching it, he is corrupted by it. And Logain is no longer able to do that from this point on. That is why they do this, so that he cannot go any madder than he is, and that whatever madness he has cannot hurt anyone too badly. At least no more than any other man could do. Right? He the most he can be now is a man with a weapon. He is no longer a man with the power. And then that's where this episode ends off. Thoughts overall on this one for the show, and where the show is going in general. I'm still hopeful. Tom, I kind of brush over it in the scene with the Fade, but he does stay behind again and fights the Fade while the boys run for their lives. And I'm looking forward to seeing him again, but I'm worried that they're not going to do him right once they reintroduce him next season. I would like to see Tom in Kyrian, or even if we're not in Kyrian, I would like to see something similar to what he does there happen again, because that the Tom Maryland is a badass. Let's just leave it at that. I don't want to get into too specific of spoilers, because I don't need to make any of these points. But if you're interested in seeing a man who can swing a hell of a lot bigger than his weight class, go read these series and pay special attention to Tom Maryland. Oh, he also dropped some lore bombs about the Gleeman. Apparently, Gleeman are viewed, or they wear the cloaks that are silly to distract from the fact that they contain the knowledge of the age. Essentially, like they're the walking history book. Um, it, it's a bit off, especially considering he doesn't have the gaudy cloak. But I do think the sentiment is true that storytellers have a special role in any society, and Tom and Loyal's commenting on it throughout the series are very. I don't want to say like perfect, but perfect. Yes, like they understand that their specific telling is not going to survive. They understand that no one's names are necessarily going to be remembered correctly, even, but stories still matter. Like the heart of the tale, the seed, will survive, and I almost want to try and apply that to this, right? If they ruin everything around it but preserve the seed, I think this show will have been worthwhile. I think that the core premise of the Wheel of Time is a hopeful message of cooperation between the peoples of the world, between the genders, between different political persuasions, like you different creeds and religions. Like, it is not our differences that will make us fail. It is only if we allow them to hold us back that we will not be able to succeed. It is only if we don't try that we will fall. And if we can actually get that message across, I will call this a success. I don't see it yet. But you're not supposed to see it yet. It's supposed to build over the course of the whole story. I would just like to see less. And we did see less. We saw less man hating this episode, right? Going from the first episode in that opening expo, all we can do is get less hateful from there, right? And they have. I think the only thing that was really egregious, in my opinion, was the whole water fire scene, the Alana licking her lips and like all the waters being pulled off by their Aes Sedais, and then Lan commenting about it being his fault, and Moiraine's being like, your mistakes are my mistakes. So aside from that one scene, I think this episode was pretty good about not beating up on them. So going forward, I'm hopeful, but that I have proven naive in my hope in the past. So I think we're gonna end it there. Go ahead and press the like button, press the dislike button. Leave a comment, subscribe, yell at me or something. It's fine. It's all fun. Y'all have a good day, and don't trust a